question is, why has Chinese manufacturing done so well, and what can we learn from that that would be relevant for India? And I think there are a number of reasons China's done well. In the past 20 years, there's been a massive amount of investment following reforms in the manufacturing sector. A lot of it due to the fact that Chinese tend to save a lot, so there were a lot of internal funds for internal investment, although a lot of that investment was wasted on loss-making state-owned companies. But more significantly, a lot of investment came from overseas, foreign direct investment, a lot of it from overseas Chinese in Hong Kong and Taiwan, where Hong Kong and Taiwanese companies basically shifted almost all of their manufacturing capacity to the mainland, taking advantage of lower wages. But in the course of doing this, they dramatically increased the productivity of Chinese manufacturing. And although Chinese wages rose, productivity rose even faster, so that unit labor costs actually declined. Now, India has had a completely different experience. India has low savings, and a lot of the savings is invested in government bonds because the government runs a large deficit, so there aren't a lot of internal funds available for investment in manufacturing. And although restrictions on foreign investment have been lifted, there hasn't been a lot of foreign investment in manufacturing because there remain a lot of trade barriers, regulatory obstacles, and of course poor infrastructure. So India's experience has obviously been very different, and all of those things need to change in order to attract that kind of foreign investment, and hopefully foreign investment from overseas Indians, because just like China, India has a large diaspora all over the world, many of whom are extremely successful and would probably be interested in investing in India and taking advantage of a freer economic opportunity. One thing that's interesting, though, is that as wages have risen in China, and wages have remained low in India, the cost of manufacturing still is lower in China because the unit labor costs are lower, because productivity is significantly higher. So that's something that India needs to address. On the other hand, China has a number of negative things going on which could hurt Chinese manufacturing, and some of those things could benefit India. As I mentioned, a lot of investment in China is wasteful. There are a lot of state-owned enterprises that are very inefficient that need to be privatized. China's currency has just appreciated a little bit, but it's likely that the currency will appreciate a lot over the next couple of years, and when that happens, a lot of industries that are low value added and low wage are likely to be priced out of the market, and a lot of producers in China in those low wage industries are likely to shift some of their production out of China to lower wage countries, possibly India. That would especially be true in textiles and apparel, footwear, toys, those types of industries where low wages matter. Which brings up one issue. I heard a lot today about the fact that cost is not the issue. We're not going to India because of cost. I hesitate when I hear that. The gentleman from General Motors said cost is not the issue, but I wonder if wages in Bangalore were the same as in Detroit, would Bangalore be such an attractive place for General Motors? I think cost does matter. Obviously many other things matter as well, but if cost didn't matter, we wouldn't be worried about exchange rate movements, and we are. So I think the fact that China's currency is going to rise will benefit India, because India's currency is not likely to rise as much, or maybe even not at all. And as a result, in some industries, some manufacturing areas where wages tend to be low and labor tends to be a high part of the value added, India could benefit from China's move to a higher value added group of industries. So that's basically all I have to say, and I'll turn back to Andrew.
But does policy follow performance?
Well, yeah, so I think that's the case, that policy does matter. In the case of India, what's clearly holding back manufacturing are a number of policies. Policy of still continuing to have relatively high trade barriers, certainly relative to China. Policy of restrictive labor market regulations, which make it expensive to fire people and therefore expensive to hire people, and the policy of subsidizing industries and therefore not having sufficient government funds to invest in infrastructure, which is going to be really critical, because right now China is developing the best ports in the world. The shipping industry is consolidating and investing in a new generation of ships that are mostly 1,000 feet long and very deep and require very big ports with very large cranes. India doesn't have that, and they need to have the government resources, or the private resources at least, and freed private resources to invest in that infrastructure in order to have an exporting manufacturing industry. So the long-winded answer to your question is yes, policy matters, and it does precede performance.
Thank you. So we are setting up.
My point was not that politics doesn't matter. I think it does matter. Nobody here is going to argue about that. But this whole process or strategy or tactics of lobbying with the government and getting the right policies in place, what is the right strategy for that? If you can show, for example, in the software industry, because it has shown performance, of course there was no policy, which was, thank God, in the first place, the government has come forward and given a whole bunch of, for example, they don't pay any tax. So if you can showcase performance, is the government more likely to listen to you and put in the right policies in place? Or if you just keep like a trade union going around there and saying, give me this, give me that, is that going to work? That's the only question.
The problem is that any change in policy has both negative and positive aspects. Trade liberalization is for the overall economy a good thing, but there are certain elements in the economy that suffer when trade is liberalized, and they tend to have the louder voice in a democratic system. So the question is, if you have a policy like trade liberalization where the winners outnumber the losers, you have to find a way to allow the winners to compensate the losers. And that's the only way in a democratic society where you can get sufficient support to have a policy that does entail having some losers. So it's a question of articulating that and building a coalition around that. But it's not an easy thing to do, especially when you have a government where among the coalition partners are parties that will never support certain types of policies. And I don't know what you do about that.
Thank you, but let me now turn to Sridhar for his observations.
Yeah, I think I would keep it short, but I thought I would keep it short.
Uh-oh.
But, everybody, I've been listening to everybody, listening to our own work. The interesting thing it suddenly struck me is everybody speaks from their own perspective, right? So you step back and look at it. You see some things are positive, some things are negative. So the first thing that might strike somebody like Peter is he's been able to sit the whole day and understand what all of us spoke, many of us from India, and that's a miracle of communication. Some of the concepts coming out from the podium here are developed in the US and brought here and transplanted. So language is not a problem. So that seems wonderful, but that is really not wonderful. So I'm going to give you the cup was half full and the cup was half empty. Yesterday I bought a book by some of the collected writings of Gandhiji, and if you've read that, some of his writing, he can write so eloquently and so simply. And so we were able to communicate even 70, 80 years ago perfectly well. So it took a long time for the world to figure that one out. So you could say it's not just communication, because we had it. Well, the second thing is, it's obvious that manufacturing sector has become a priority because the government wants growth. I don't know why, but suddenly the government says we want growth, and so this is the only sector which is capable of growing. Obviously, you got this huge agriculture sector. Nobody wants to touch it, because if you touch it, you're going to get rid of employment, and there'll be so many unemployed people that the government would probably be voted out within 100 days of doing that. So you do have a problem. So the half-full side of it is, yes, manufacturing is a priority. The half-empty side is, I don't dare touch agriculture, which is one of the most inefficient sectors in this economy. And that's a problem which has been faced by not just India. To take a line off Natalia, I mean, you go to England, you got these little farmers who are running their little farm with a little horse and a few cows and a few pigs and a few mad cow diseases, right? And it's a trade-off you make, but we have made extreme trade-offs during development in the last several years. So yes, manufacturing is a priority, but it took us a long time to recognize it. And we still don't want to touch that sector, which is very extremely inefficient. It's two sides to the story. The good thing is, I think the opportunity. So I'll tell you the good thing about it. So now again, coming back to the good side of it, my whole purpose is to confuse you. I'm an academic, right? That if I spoke about manufacturing in the US at the end of a conference, I'll have two people in the audience, me and the person closing the room after me. I can't speak of manufacturing in the US because nobody wants to listen to me. The sales of books on manufacturing have plummeted. If you call Irvin and say, how many copies of manufacturing strategy you sell, they'll say 20 in the whole of the US. Just nobody wants to learn about manufacturing. The fact that you're all here, you see an opportunity. But there is a lining, a dark lining to it, which I do see. And that is that though it's a tremendous opportunity, there are some development issues which have come out. That brings me to the fourth point, which I've been hearing. Kumar made it and somebody else made it, and that's basically very few venture capitalists in this country. Kumar said the family-owned businesses are not willing to venture their money further into their businesses. Essentially, if manufacturing, this is the half-empty side of it, if manufacturing is really such a glorious industry, why is not money coming in? Okay. Obviously, it is not coming in because there are huge risks involved in this. Where are the risks? And this is something that academics have to sense. The risks really are, of course, the family businesses may not be putting in because they don't want to lose their shirt. Okay. So probably they should sell out. Fine. They should dilute their holdings. Fine. All that you can propose. But still, why is not a lot of foreign direct investment? It's coming in slowly. It's coming in big, but it's coming in hesitantly. Okay. Where is the problem? The problem is really that even if venture capitalists came in, and that is very important. I mean, to make manufacturing grow, to have innovation, we need people taking risks. I have Arun saying, it's so cheap to develop stuff in India, so why are people not putting money in here? If it's a fourth of the money, and we are so smart, what's the problem? The problem really is that if, that's what I believe. And so the opportunity is we are low cost, we can leverage it. And I agree with Ira that it is low cost, we can leverage it. And there is a low risk. The problem is not on the demand side. I have a strong suspicion the problem is on the supply side. And that's the half-full argument, which is what I think as an academic we should try to see. The supply side argument is very simple. You go to a bookshop. There was a time where every shelf, instead of filled with P.G. Wodehouse or Sherlock Holmes, I don't know, classics or Indian literature, every shelf used to be filled with C++, J++, A++, D++, Z++. Every corner of a shop would be filled with books on programming. Even though we are large, I think it's almost sucked up today to capacity, almost there. Somebody has to compute the productivity per engineer or per scientist in India and see whether that matches the world level for unit cost. If that is true, then we have a serious problem, because the problem is no longer the world wants it. The problem is it'll take 10 years before those people get trained and come into the labor force. It will be those sort of problems. So what can the government, this is what probably the government should be looking at, which are the key supply bottlenecks and where can it stop subsidizing so people start looking for the right kind of jobs and right kind of directions to move to the manufacturing sector. That, when I hear all this, somehow I feel that could be a research agenda. Basically, simply asking, why are venture capitalists not coming into India? And that may be one of the questions we could pose.
Thank you, Sridhar. What I'll do now is ask for some questions from the audience and to encourage discussion. And if not, I will pose some provocative comments or questions myself. So questions from the audience, perhaps. There's one over there. It's agreed.
Good evening, everybody. My question is to Mr. Sastry only. Mr. Sastry was of the view how do we develop leaders in manufacturing? This is an issue with us. I understand that we are in a best position, or in fact we are developing the best leaders in manufacturing. Whether we have got the best B schools in the world, We have got the best IITs. Now, the main thing is like whether the leaders developed from there are doing something else than manufacturing.
Actually, let me preface my response. I didn't have an answer. I said we should be preparing leaders. Your question is that we already have them. Probably not enough. Just like Sridhar said, probably we just have too few of the leaders. We can probably count them on our fingertips, or maybe fingertips and toenails, and that's the end of the story. We need to develop a lot more of them.
Okay. Question over there.
I'm Yogesh Gupta. My question is that, in every sector of our economy, our industry, in our country, the ratio of organized versus unorganized sector is too vast. It is 1:10. In leather, it is 1:20 maybe. In pharma, like 2,000 company versus 250 company. So what could be done to accumulate to join the unorganized sector into organized sector, so that the whole problem could be erased out to a large extent? Because there is not much scope in organized sector. They are already having best sets of system. They already have best of consultants to work upon on the efficiencies and other aspects. But what about the unorganized sector? That is a major